Hello and welcome to History Sleep Stories. The candle flickered against the cold stone walls, casting shadows that seemed almost alive, as if the room itself were listening. In the stillness of that quiet evening, centuries ago, a man sat alone with a quill in his hand and a mind alive with visions few could comprehend. The air was thick with the faint scent of herbs and ink, a mixture so ordinary yet oddly comforting, grounding the man in the present even as his thoughts wandered far beyond it. In this moment, there was no urgency, no crowds, no noise of the world outside. Only the whisper of possibility, as if time itself paused to witness what would be written. And it was in this very pause that he chose to speak, not loudly, not with proclamations meant to stir panic, but in whispers, subtle enough to be missed by those unprepared, yet persistent enough to echo across centuries. As you settle in to listen to this sleep story, a like and a subscription are a quiet way to support this channel. And if you feel comfortable, you're warmly invited to share where you're listening from in the comments. He was known to some as a physician, to others as a scholar, but history would remember him for something far more enigmatic. His writings were not meant for the comfort of his contemporaries, they were messages sent into the future, into the lives of people who would live in a world unimaginable to him. And though the pages of his manuscripts were filled with strange symbols, cryptic numbers, and riddles wrapped in rhyme, the intention behind them was clear, to leave a warning, a note of awareness, a caution that the world might not yet be ready to hear. It is here, in this quiet act of recording, that the first stirrings of what we now call prophecy emerge, not in fanfare, but in subtle insistence, like a soft wind pressing against a closed door, suggesting a presence beyond the visible. As you imagine the scene, consider the contrast between that ancient stillness and the world we inhabit today, filled with constant movement, endless noise, and information arriving faster than we can process it. What was deliberate and slow in his time, the careful choosing of words, the rhythm of ink across parchment, feels urgent to us now, almost frantic, as we search for meaning in the chaos. Yet perhaps that is exactly the point. Some warnings are never meant to shock, to inspire immediate action, or to create fear. They are meant to linger, to settle softly into the mind like a shadow at dusk, prompting reflection, nudging awareness, and inviting contemplation. In their subtlety, they endure far longer than any shouted proclamation ever could. It is important to recognize that these were not casual musings, nor the flights of an idle imagination. The man we now call Nostradamus understood the fragility of time and the persistence of human curiosity. He wrote with the knowledge that generations yet unborn would struggle to interpret his words, that the world itself would shift in ways unpredictable and profound. And in that understanding, he found a method, a gentle yet compelling cadence, a rhythm of hints and suggestions designed to draw the reader into thought, into reflection, into a state of quiet questioning. So tonight, as you listen and let these words settle, allow yourself to imagine the flickering candle, the whisper of ink on paper, the patient gaze of a man peering through the veil of centuries. There is no urgency here, only presence. And though we do not yet know what he saw, or why he chose to write it in riddles that would outlive him, there is an unmistakable sense that something significant lingers within those pages, waiting for us to notice. In this space between past and present, between shadow and light, the first threads of understanding begin to form, subtle and insistent, calling quietly across time to anyone who will listen. The world into which Nostradamus wrote his riddles was far from gentle. If we lift the veil of centuries and peer into the streets, the villages, and the courts of 16th-century France, we see a landscape trembling under the weight of fear and uncertainty. Disease was not an abstraction but a constant companion. The plague had left its mark across towns and countrysides alike, claiming lives indiscriminately, leaving behind empty homes, grieving families, and a lingering suspicion that the world itself had grown hostile. In such times, the rhythm of daily life was dictated not by seasons or commerce, but by the unpredictable swing of misfortune. Survival was not guaranteed, and every cough, every sudden death, carried the possibility of catastrophe. In this environment, whispers of the future were not mere curiosities, they were vital, offering guidance, warning, or solace to those desperate to make sense of chaos. And chaos, in fact, stretched far beyond illness. Europe was a continent in constant turmoil, fragmented by wars of succession, border disputes, and shifting alliances. Cities were fortified, armies marched with unsettling regularity, and news traveled slowly enough that rumor and fear often outpaced truth. The familiar became uncertain. Friends might vanish, neighbors could betray, and rulers themselves could be instruments of both protection and peril. For someone living in this era, every day was a delicate negotiation with unpredictability, a negotiation not just of survival, but of comprehension. Humanity's attempt to anchor itself amidst such relentless instability gave rise to a profound hunger for meaning, and in that hunger, prophecy found its home. Religious fear, too, weighed heavily on the collective psyche. The Reformation had ignited fires of conviction and conflict, challenging long-held doctrines and sparking suspicion, accusation, and violence. Individuals were torn between loyalty to tradition and the allure, or terror, of reform. Heresy was not merely frowned upon, it was punishable by imprisonment, exile, or death. In such a climate, knowledge was a dangerous commodity, and even the smallest misstep in interpretation could carry severe consequences. To survive, one needed not only wisdom, but discretion. Words had to be chosen with care, meaning had to be veiled beneath layers of metaphor and allegory. It was a world where a prophecy written plainly might invite hostility, but one hidden in clever riddles could endure, traveling safely across decades without threatening its author. And so, the coded language that Nostradamus employed was not an indulgence, it was necessity, a shield, and a strategy. Above the streets and battlements, the skies themselves seemed to conspire with uncertainty. Comets and eclipses were not mere astronomical curiosities, they were omens, read and misread, feared and revered. People looked upward with a mixture of awe and terror, seeking patterns that might reveal the intentions of forces beyond human comprehension. The heavens became a canvas for anxiety, and every unusual celestial event could inspire wonder, dread, or both. Within this cosmic tension, a man with the ability to interpret signs, however cryptically, held power, not over armies or monarchs, but over perception itself. To write, to predict, to suggest without direct accusation, was to hold a subtle dominion over how people understood their place in a fragile, turbulent universe. This was the stage on which Nostradamus acted, a world that demanded vigilance, discernment, and creativity in equal measure. People had learned that survival was not always about action, sometimes it was about preparation, understanding, and the quiet reception of guidance from those who saw beyond the immediate horizon. Prophecy offered a kind of lifeline, a map through uncertainty, and yet it was rarely straightforward. Its authority depended on the respect accorded to its messenger, the subtlety of its delivery, and the willingness of the audience to see patterns that might not yet be obvious. In a society where the future could be lethal, understanding, even partially, was a form of insurance, a psychological bomb against the relentless unpredictability of life. It is easy for us now, in our age of instant communication and constant reassurance, to underestimate the weight of living in such a precarious world. But imagine, for a moment, walking the cobblestone streets of a small town, knowing that illness could strike without warning, that rumors of rebellion might sweep through the marketplace, and that even the stars themselves might signal impending danger. In such a context, a man quietly scribbling quatrains, meditating on cosmic patterns and human folly, could be both a source of hope and a warning. The rhythm of his pen became a bridge between the terrifying unknown and the fragile comfort of understanding, a reminder that the future could, at least in part, be anticipated if one was willing to listen carefully to the whispers it offered. And so, in the dim candlelight and among the subtle scents of herbs and ink, Nostradamus wrote. Not to alarm, not to dictate, but to encode, to preserve, and to communicate across centuries. He understood, perhaps instinctively, that the world's chaos demanded subtlety, that meaning hidden within layers of riddles could survive where plain words would perish. The fragility of life, the tension of uncertainty, the ever-present shadow of mortality, all these shaped his work and informed the cadence of his warnings. And as we consider his words now, centuries later, we begin to understand why prophecy mattered so profoundly in a world afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Behind the layers of riddles and cryptic quatrains, there was a man of flesh and thought, not merely a shadow of prophecy. Nostradamus was, first and foremost, a physician, trained in the arts of healing, attentive to the frailties of the human body, and intimately acquainted with the delicate balance between life and death. His observations were meticulous, born from necessity and curiosity, a careful eye on the patterns of disease, the cycles of seasons, and the subtle shifts in human behavior. In his profession, he confronted mortality daily, and in doing so, developed a sensitivity to the forces that shaped not only the physical body but the life it inhabited. To him, understanding the world was not a matter of speculation alone, it was a matter of survival, a practical tool, a lens through which to interpret events both personal and universal. Yet his talents extended beyond the tangible and measurable. He observed society with equal precision, the movements of power, the whispers of politics, and the subtle currents of human desire and fear. It was this duality, the blending of empirical study and acute social observation, that made his prophecies resonate. He was not merely a dreamer, nor solely a scholar of the arcane, he was a man who understood that knowledge, when wielded wisely, could illuminate the darkness that so often enveloped his contemporaries. And he understood, too, that revelation needed careful packaging. Truth, when presented too plainly, could provoke panic, invite persecution, or be dismissed entirely. By cloaking his insights in metaphor and rhythm, he created a protective layer, ensuring that the value of his observations could survive both scrutiny and skepticism. Humanization comes from recognizing the ordinary within the extraordinary. Nostradamus was not immune to doubt, to fatigue, or to the anxieties that accompany any mind contemplating the future. He recorded his visions and interpretations in quiet moments, often late at night, when the world had fallen asleep and the clamor of daily life could not intrude upon the fragile space of contemplation. In these hours, one can imagine him wrestling with questions that remain familiar to us today: how much should be revealed? How much is too much? And most poignantly, how does one convey insight that may not be comprehended for centuries? These are questions born not of vanity, but of conscientious care, a recognition of the weight words carry across time and human imagination. Even as we consider him now, there is an undeniable authority in the meticulousness of his approach. His quatrains were not arbitrary, they were structured, measured, and deliberate. Each line, each syllable, chosen with care to encode layers of meaning accessible to those prepared to seek them. And yet, for all the precision, there is a humility in his work, a tacit acknowledgement that the future is not owned by any one mind, no matter how astute. In this duality, authority is balanced by restraint, knowledge tempered by uncertainty, and the reader is invited into a subtle dance with understanding rather than being dictated to by it. This careful balancing act builds trust, as we sense that his intention is not to manipulate, but to inform, to guide, and perhaps, to caution. Beyond the quill and parchment, he was a man deeply attuned to the rhythms of life. His travels as a physician exposed him to suffering and resilience, grief and hope. Each encounter, each life saved or lost, contributed to a worldview that was both compassionate and analytical. It was in these interactions that he honed his sensitivity to patterns, how fear can shape decisions, how desperation can obscure truth, and how small actions can ripple across communities in unforeseen ways. These insights, subtle yet profound, were woven into the fabric of his prophecies, giving them a texture that speaks to human experience as much as to cosmic design. Importantly, Nostradamus did not set out to be a prophet in the sense we often imagine. He did not crave recognition or seek to astonish. Instead, he was motivated by curiosity, responsibility, and perhaps a quiet moral imperative. He wrote because he saw that knowledge, when offered with care, could prepare minds for uncertainty and offer guidance when the future seemed unmoored. He understood the fragility of human comprehension and respected the intelligence of those who would one day read his words. In doing so, he invited a partnership across time, a dialogue between the observer and the observed, between his consciousness and ours. As we reflect on the man behind the quatrains, we are reminded that the extraordinary often arises from ordinary dedication, careful observation, and the conscientious use of knowledge. He was a physician who attended to the body, an observer who attended to society, and a thinker who attended to time itself. In each capacity, he exhibited care, precision, and a subtle insistence that the world could be understood, if only one looked closely enough. The riddles he left behind are not just curiosities, they are reflections of a mind navigating uncertainty, a consciousness reaching forward, and a human being deeply aware of both the limits and the possibilities inherent in understanding. And so, from this foundation of humanity and purpose, we move toward understanding why he chose the language he did, why prophecy required code, and why his observations, however cryptic, continue to echo across centuries. His story is not only about predictions, it is about the delicate interplay of knowledge, responsibility, and the enduring human quest to anticipate the unknown. To understand Nostradamus' quatrains is to recognize that they were never meant to be easily deciphered. The man behind them understood that truth, when delivered plainly, could either terrify or be dismissed outright. Instead, he chose a language that invited curiosity, a puzzle wrapped in poetry, a tapestry of symbols and ambiguities that demanded engagement. This deliberate obscurity was not a sign of caprice, nor an attempt to baffle, it was a strategy, a way to ensure that the essence of his insights would survive time, survive scrutiny, and reach those prepared to perceive it. In a world where misinterpretation could be dangerous, he encoded his wisdom like a watchful guardian, careful that only those with patience, reflection, and attentiveness might glimpse what lay beneath the surface. His method was multifaceted. He drew upon multiple languages, weaving French with Latin, Greek, and Italian, interlacing them with allusions to history, mythology, and contemporary events. This polyglot approach served two purposes: it provided layers of protection against casual reading, and it created a depth that invited pattern recognition. To modern eyes, the quatrains often appear cryptic, even nonsensical, yet within this apparent chaos lies the heartbeat of careful observation. Words were chosen for double meanings, for phonetic echoes, and for cultural resonance, each one a small key to unlock broader understanding. The fragmented timelines he employed, skipping from one epoch to another, sometimes centuries apart, were not errors, but deliberate provocations, designed to prevent certainty while encouraging reflection. By refusing a linear path, he compelled readers to think, to connect, and to recognize patterns where simplicity might otherwise blind them. This layered obscurity also served as a form of self-preservation. In his era, direct commentary on political, religious, or social upheaval could bring scrutiny, punishment, or even death. By hiding the truth beneath riddles and allegory, Nostradamus could express insights that were provocative without ever naming names outright. His work became simultaneously daring and cautious, a delicate balance between revelation and discretion. Each quatrain was a whisper, faint enough to escape persecution, yet persistent enough to resonate across generations. It is this subtle tension between concealment and revelation that imbues his writings with their unique power, a quiet insistence that something important waits to be discovered, if one has the patience to look. Beyond protection, the riddles also functioned as an intellectual invitation. They encouraged readers to engage actively with his work, to search for connections between symbols, events, and human behavior. In this engagement, there is a psychological satisfaction akin to uncovering a secret meant for oneself, a sense of participating in forbidden knowledge. This is why his quatrains continue to captivate. Each reader becomes a detective, piecing together fragments, hypothesizing, and, in the process, forming a personal connection to the text. The reward is not certainty, but insight, a glimpse into the patterns that govern both past and present, and perhaps, by extension, the human condition itself. Irony is also woven into his approach. The very obscurity that frustrates the casual reader is what ensures the endurance of his work. While others might produce proclamations that fade with immediate relevance, riddles endure, circulating through time precisely because they require engagement. Each generation brings its own perspective, its own experiences, and its own anxieties, allowing the quatrains to take on new meaning as context changes. In this sense, Nostradamus created not a static set of predictions, but a living dialogue across centuries, a conversation in which interpretation is as important as content, and the act of decoding becomes an exploration of both history and human psychology. The deliberate structure of ambiguity also reinforces suspense. Even as readers attempt to decipher meaning, they are aware that understanding is never fully within reach. This sustained uncertainty keeps attention engaged, inviting reflection while preventing complacency. The mind seeks resolution, yet resolution remains just out of reach. In this tension, fascination thrives. Each reading becomes an exercise in anticipation, a balancing act between revelation and mystery, and the psychological pull is profound. It is the very nature of riddles to keep the observer returning, eager for hints, for patterns, for insight that may or may not be revealed. Finally, the use of symbolism allowed Nostradamus to address universal themes without being bound by specific details. A comet could signify upheaval, a river could evoke change, a crowned figure could embody authority, yet none were tethered to one time or place. By blending imagery with allegorical resonance, he created layers of meaning that could resonate with multiple generations, allowing prophecy to be both timeless and adaptable. This universality, paired with deliberate obscurity, is what grants his work endurance. It invites each reader to find relevance in their own context, bridging centuries with a whisper rather than a shout. And so, the riddles of Nostradamus are more than puzzles, they are a carefully calibrated method of communication, designed to convey insight while preserving safety, to provoke thought while avoiding certainty, and to challenge readers to see patterns hidden in the chaos of time. It is in this deliberate obscurity, this dance between revelation and concealment, that the true genius of his approach emerges, a genius that continues to draw fascination, speculation, and reflection, centuries after the ink first dried on the parchment. In the next chapter, we will explore the specific prophecies that refuse to remain silent, those that, despite their cryptic form, manage to echo across time, compelling attention and inviting interpretation. Among the countless quatrains that Nostradamus penned, one set of verses has drawn persistent attention through the centuries, quietly insisting that its significance might extend far beyond his own era. Unlike the riddles that drift unnoticed or the passages that remain enigmatic in isolation, these lines hum with a subtle insistence, as if they were meant to speak across the expanse of time. Yet, even here, clarity is never offered outright. The words themselves do not name modern nations, describe specific events, or claim omniscience. Instead, they rely on allegory, metaphor, and an intricate layering of imagery that invites interpretation, requiring the reader to look closely and think deeply. It is within this space between the literal and the symbolic that their enduring fascination lies, for the prophecy refuses to remain silent even as centuries pass. Consider the imagery of upheaval that runs through these verses. Natural disasters, celestial disturbances, and sudden shifts in leadership appear alongside more abstract warnings of unrest, uncertainty, and change. A comet streaks across the sky, the rivers are troubled, rulers rise and fall with little warning. On their own, these images could seem vague, perhaps coincidental, but patterns emerge when one examines them in context with historical cycles. Each symbol functions like a note in a larger composition, and while no single note conveys the entire melody, the arrangement hints at recurring rhythms of human experience. It is this cadence of repetition, of echo and resonance, that gives the prophecy its persistent relevance. It asks the observer to notice patterns that might otherwise go unseen, to consider events not as isolated occurrences but as parts of a grander, unfolding narrative. The tension arises in the interpretive challenge. One reader may see a comet as a literal astronomical event, while another perceives it as a metaphor for societal upheaval. Rivers may symbolize commerce, migration, or the flow of time itself. The prophecy does not provide a single, definitive meaning. Instead, it cultivates reflection, prompting each observer to engage actively with the text, to weigh evidence, and to consider implications for their own world. This is where the psychological allure of the quatrains intensifies. The human mind is naturally drawn to pattern recognition, to the desire to impose order on uncertainty, and here, it is invited to do so deliberately. Each reading becomes a participatory exercise, a subtle negotiation between past and present, where meaning is discovered as much in the act of interpretation as in the verses themselves. It is also crucial to recognize that Nostradamus does not offer panic as an outcome. The verses are not alarmist proclamations demanding immediate action or instilling fear. Instead, they suggest awareness and contemplation, inviting reflection on cycles of human behavior and the forces that shape societies. In doing so, they maintain a delicate balance between intrigue and calm, drawing the listener in without overwhelming them. This balance is precisely why the prophecy has continued to captivate. It respects the intelligence of its audience, offering insight rather than dictating belief. There is an elegance in this restraint, a recognition that understanding emerges gradually, over time, through careful attention and open-minded consideration. One of the most compelling aspects of this prophecy is its temporal elasticity. Though written centuries ago, its imagery resonates with contemporary events in subtle ways. Observers note parallels between the rise and fall of leaders, shifts in global alliances, social unrest, and environmental disruptions. None of these connections are asserted as inevitable. Instead, they are offered as interpretive possibilities, each dependent on perspective, context, and careful observation. The prophecy functions as a mirror, reflecting patterns that recur across history and offering the attentive reader an opportunity to consider how cycles of uncertainty and change continue to shape the world. In this sense, the quatrains act less as predictions than as invitations to mindfulness, encouraging us to see connections that might otherwise remain invisible. Curiosity escalates as one follows the rhythm of the verses. Each line suggests the next, creating an internal momentum that propels the observer forward. The delayed payoff heightens engagement, the mind searches for resolution, for clarity, yet finds that comprehension is iterative, cumulative, and layered. This narrative pacing mirrors the experience of real-life uncertainty. We rarely receive immediate, absolute clarity about events unfolding around us. Instead, we notice patterns gradually, building understanding over time. Nostradamus' method mirrors this natural process, encouraging an alignment between the observer's thought patterns and the unfolding structure of history itself. Interpretive tension is amplified by the juxtaposition of specificity and ambiguity. Events are described with precision in imagery, a comet, a war, a leader's fall, but their exact reference remain undefined. This contrast creates a cognitive pull. The mind seeks to anchor symbols in reality while being aware that absolute certainty is unattainable. It is this very tension that captivates, fostering reflection without demanding belief. The reader becomes an active participant, piecing together clues, hypothesizing connections, and testing assumptions, all while remaining aware that interpretation is provisional, subject to revision as new insights emerge. Even in its ambiguity, the prophecy refuses to remain quiet. It speaks through rhythm, through recurring imagery, through the tension between certainty and mystery. It is a quiet insistence, a persistent presence across time, reminding us that attention, reflection, and discernment are necessary tools for navigating uncertainty. In this sense, the prophecy transcends its historical origins. It is less a prediction of specific events than a meditation on human experience, on cycles of upheaval, and on the subtle signals that often go unnoticed until their consequences manifest. As we consider these verses today, we are invited into a dialogue that spans centuries. The prophecy challenges us not to predict, not to fear, but to notice, to reflect, and to recognize that patterns, though sometimes obscure, recur in ways that shape human life. It refuses to be ignored, yet it offers no certainty. Its power lies in its persistence, in the way it continues to resonate across time, drawing attention and thought, and compelling interpretation. In the next chapter, we will explore the signs we were never supposed to notice, the subtle markers embedded within his quatrains that seem to echo through history and, perhaps, into our present moment. Even as the verses of Nostradamus continue to resist straightforward interpretation, subtle patterns begin to emerge for those willing to look closely. Symbols once meant to evoke distant or timeless events now seem to echo in the circumstances of our own era. A river troubled by storms may parallel climate disturbances that ripple across continents. A comet streaking the heavens may suggest more than celestial drama, hinting at moments of upheaval in societies or economies. Though the quatrains are not prescriptive, their imagery invites attentive readers to draw connections, to notice the rhythms of history that repeat in ways both uncanny and instructive. These are the signs we were never supposed to notice at first glance, small markers hidden in plain sight, waiting for minds attuned to see them. Consider social unrest, for instance. Nostradamus often described populations in motion, rising against the weight of rulers or the burden of inequality, without ever naming the cities or nations involved. In his time, such events were frequent, as peasant uprisings, religious conflicts, and civil strife shaped the contours of daily life. Today, similar tensions manifest in marches, protests, and debates that spread across digital networks, binding societies in ways unimaginable to those of the 16th century. The quatrains' references to collective movement and shifting allegiances resonate here, not as exact predictions, but as reflections of patterns that recur whenever human dissatisfaction reaches a tipping point. Awareness of these echoes invites a quiet contemplation. The past, though distant, continues to whisper, reminding us that the forces driving change are enduring and often cyclical. Environmental shifts, too, are woven into the imagery. Flooded rivers, scorched lands, and unusual storms appear repeatedly in the texts, framed as signs of imbalance or warning. In Nostradamus' day, these were literal hazards. Droughts, famines, and plague often followed climatic disruption, shaping survival and society. Now, modern readers perceive correlations with global phenomena, rising sea levels, extreme weather, and ecological strain. The resonance is subtle, never declared explicitly, but the human mind, ever alert to patterns, cannot help but notice. In this reflective space, prophecy becomes a lens through which to consider our relationship with the natural world, prompting awareness without demanding fear. It is a gentle nudge, a suggestion that attention to patterns, social, environmental, or otherwise, offers insight and guidance. Technology, though unimagined in the 16th century, finds its symbolic counterpart in the quatrains as well. References to sudden, transformative forces, to tools or agents that shift the balance of power, can be interpreted as precursors to the complex innovations that define our era. Communication spreads faster than ever before, information travels instantly, and digital networks shape society in ways previously impossible. The verses, in their cryptic form, align with this dynamic, highlighting the recurring human experience of encountering disruptive forces that challenge existing norms. The signs, once metaphorical, now invite reflection on the ways humanity adapts to unprecedented change, reminding us that the essence of his observations transcends specific technologies, touching instead on the universal experience of disruption and adaptation. These connections are reinforced through pattern seeking, a psychological trigger embedded in the very act of reading the quatrains. Our brains are wired to detect repetition, to draw correlations, and to anticipate what might follow. Nostradamus' work, with its deliberate ambiguity, encourages this engagement, prompting each observer to participate actively in meaning-making. Each symbol, each image, becomes a small puzzle piece, offering the thrill of discovery while leaving enough uncertainty to maintain fascination. The mind, compelled by relevance bias, naturally searches for links between historical imagery and contemporary experience, creating a bridge between centuries without forcing conclusions. In this way, the prophecy speaks softly but insistently, guiding attention while preserving the quiet tension that sustains engagement. Yet there is a mild unease in these reflections, a sense that the patterns are both familiar and unpredictable. While recognition of historical echoes is comforting, the subtle unpredictability of modern contexts introduces a gentle tension. It is not alarmist, but it is undeniable. The world continues to shift, and the markers embedded in the quatrains suggest that awareness is a necessary companion to understanding. Observing these signs does not eliminate uncertainty, but it sharpens perception, allowing the mind to anticipate rhythms and cycles that might otherwise pass unnoticed. This delicate balance between curiosity and caution is part of the enduring allure of the texts, compelling reflection while maintaining calm. In addition, the quatrains foster a reflective engagement with human behavior itself. Symbols of unrest, imbalance, or sudden change are not merely external, they mirror internal dynamics, the ebb and flow of fear, ambition, and resilience that drive societies and individuals alike. Recognizing these patterns invites a quiet introspection. The forces that shape history are not distant abstractions but ongoing expressions of human choice and circumstance. By noticing the echoes of the past, the attentive observer gains insight into both collective and personal dynamics, seeing how decisions, actions, and consequences unfold in subtle but persistent ways. Ultimately, the signs we were never meant to notice are not warnings in the conventional sense. They are invitations to awareness, exercises in reflection, and subtle reminders that the rhythms of human experience, social, environmental, and technological, persist across time. Nostradamus encoded these markers with care, knowing that the attentive mind would seek, interpret, and learn, while the casual reader might glance past them entirely. It is in this interplay between attention and omission, observation and interpretation, that the prophecy maintains its quiet relevance, bridging centuries without resorting to alarm, guiding the thoughtful observer toward contemplation of patterns, cycles, and the enduring flow of human experience. As we step into these patterns, seeing the echoes of his imagery in our present world, the lines between past and present begin to blur. We recognize that the prophecy does not demand belief, nor does it insist upon action. Instead, it quietly asserts that careful observation and reflective engagement yield understanding, that noticing what others overlook can reveal deeper truths, and that history, when viewed attentively, continues to speak. In the next chapter, we will confront the question of interpretation itself, examining the tension between coincidence, pattern, and warning, and exploring how the quatrains challenge us to discern meaning without certainty. As we reflect on the signs that seem to echo through history and into our present, a question inevitably arises: are these connections truly prophetic, or are they the result of coincidence, pattern recognition, or even wishful thinking? Nostradamus' quatrains, in their deliberate ambiguity, invite exactly this tension. The observer is left suspended between possibilities, encouraged to weigh evidence, contrast interpretations, and confront the limits of certainty. In doing so, we enter a space where cognitive dissonance thrives, the mind simultaneously recognizing parallels and questioning their significance, oscillating between fascination and skepticism. It is precisely in this tension that engagement deepens, for the human mind is compelled by unresolved questions, drawn toward exploration without promise of definitive answers. Historical context provides one lens for interpretation. Scholars note that Nostradamus wrote in a time of pervasive fear, upheaval, and uncertainty, where symbols of disaster, celestial events, and societal change were part of daily experience. Viewed through this lens, the quatrains may reflect careful observation rather than mystical insight. They are records of contemporary events encoded with metaphor and allegory, meant to offer guidance to those navigating a chaotic world. Patterns observed today could therefore be coincidences of circumstance, echoes of recurring human behavior, or parallels that arise naturally when history repeats itself. In this interpretation, prophecy functions less as prediction and more as documentation, a mirror held up to the fears and expectations of his time. Yet there exists a mystical reading that cannot be ignored. For centuries, readers and interpreters have found in the quatrains a resonance that seems to transcend chronology, culture, and geography. Comets, wars, and upheavals described in symbolic terms often appear to align with events far beyond the lifetime of their author. To those inclined toward the mystical, these alignments are not random but intentional, the outcome of insight into forces beyond ordinary perception. In this framework, the ambiguity of the quatrains is a necessary feature, hidden knowledge that speaks to those attuned to recognize it, bridging past, present, and future. The interpretive challenge is part of the power, meaning emerges only when the observer engages deeply, reflecting both the timelessness of human experience and the persistence of mystery. Skeptical analysis, conversely, warns against overinterpretation. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, inclined to see correlations even where none exist. The quatrain's imagery, while compelling, is often vague enough that it can be aligned with numerous historical or contemporary events. Comets, floods, and social upheaval recur with sufficient regularity to make alignment with specific incidents appear convincing. Skeptics argue that confirmation bias drives much of the fascination, with observers selecting examples that fit the narrative while ignoring the countless instances that do not. In this reading, the quatrains are remarkable not for their predictive accuracy, but for the human mind's desire to impose coherence on complexity. What makes Nostradamus' work enduring, however, is that it accommodates all these perspectives simultaneously. It allows historical, mystical, and skeptical readings to coexist without conflict. There is no imposed narrative, no single truth demanded of the reader. This autonomy is a subtle but profound psychological trigger. It grants authority to the original author while empowering the audience to draw their own conclusions. The quatrains do not dictate what to believe, they invite engagement, reflection, and analysis. The mind becomes an active participant in discovery, seeking patterns, weighing interpretations, and ultimately constructing a personal understanding of meaning. This balance of authority and autonomy is rare in any text and contributes to the continuing fascination that spans centuries. Irony is woven throughout this interpretive process. Those who dismiss the quatrains as coincidence may find themselves intrigued by the precision with which others interpret them, while those who see prophetic significance are simultaneously reminded that certainty is elusive. Each interpretation reinforces the quatrains' endurance by ensuring that they remain relevant across contexts and eras. Their power lies not in absolute truth but in the capacity to provoke thought, reflection, and debate, engaging intellect and emotion in equal measure. This interplay of possibilities also fosters intellectual curiosity. Observers are compelled to research, compare, and contrast, consulting history, science, and literature to explore potential alignments. Each quatrain becomes a catalyst for exploration, a doorway to understanding human behavior, historical cycles, and the psychological mechanisms that drive pattern recognition. In navigating these possibilities, the audience develops both discernment and empathy, appreciating that multiple interpretations can coexist without diminishing the richness of the experience. Ultimately, the question of coincidence, pattern, or warning is not meant to be resolved definitively. Its unresolved nature is precisely the mechanism by which engagement deepens. The tension created between uncertainty and insight mirrors the experience of life itself, complex, ambiguous, and layered. Nostradamus' quatrains function as a mirror for this complexity, allowing each reader to confront their own assumptions, biases, and expectations while participating in a conversation that spans centuries. As we consider this interpretive space, we recognize that the quatrains are less about prediction than about reflection. They ask us to notice what others overlook, to contemplate the forces that shape human experience, and to explore the connections that thread past, present, and future together. The prophecy refuses to remain silent not because it dictates the future, but because it provokes inquiry, nurtures curiosity, and invites thoughtfulness. In the next chapter, we will examine moments when the world begins to resemble the past, drawing parallels between Nostradamus' symbolic warnings and the rhythms, cycles, and disruptions of our contemporary era. As we ponder the interpretive tension of Nostradamus' quatrains, it becomes strikingly clear that the world we inhabit today mirrors, in subtle yet profound ways, the uncertainties and anxieties of his own era. Though separated by centuries, the rhythm of human experience remains familiar. Fear cycles rise and fall, information cascades faster than comprehension, and the future often appears uncertain and unstable. In many respects, these echoes are less about prophecy than about the enduring patterns of society, the persistence of human behavior, and the ways in which we navigate the unknown. Nostradamus captured these patterns with such care and subtlety that, when we look closely, the past seems to ripple forward into the present, inviting reflection rather than alarm. Consider fear itself. In the 16th century, the plague spread invisibly, sparking panic, rumor, and desperate attempts at control. Wars erupted unexpectedly, religious tensions fractured communities, and natural disasters seemed to appear without warning. Society was locked in a continuous cycle of anticipation and reaction, a dance between uncertainty and adaptation. Today, while the agents of fear are different, viruses, political instability, environmental crises, and economic fluctuations, the experience is remarkably similar. Humanity still reacts to uncertainty with anxiety, seeks patterns in chaos, and looks to figures of authority, guidance, or insight to make sense of what lies ahead. The echoes of fear across centuries remind us that while circumstances change, the human response to the unknown remains constant. Information overload is another striking parallel. In Nostradamus' time, messages traveled slowly and were often distorted, leaving gaps in understanding that fueled speculation. Word of an event in a distant city could arrive days or weeks later, already reshaped by rumor or partial knowledge. Today, the channels are instantaneous and relentless. News, social media, and global communication saturate every moment, often creating a sense of urgency and a compulsion to act or react. The difference is speed, not essence. Then as now, humans grappled with incomplete knowledge, and in doing so, sought meaning in patterns, connections, and interpretations. Nostradamus' quatrains, deliberately cryptic, engaged this same impulse, offering a mirror to the human desire to organize uncertainty into comprehensible narratives. Uncertainty itself remains a central thread linking past and present. Leaders rise and fall, markets fluctuate, technologies transform society, and natural forces disrupt lives with little warning. In the 16th century, the unknown dictated much of daily existence, fostering both caution and ingenuity. Today, we encounter a parallel. We navigate a world shaped by global interconnections, rapid innovation, and unpredictable crises. The tools may differ, but the psychological experience, the blend of curiosity, apprehension, and the search for patterns, remains remarkably similar. By observing these echoes, we gain a sense of continuity, a subtle reassurance that humanity has always faced uncertainty, adapted, and endured. Historical repetition also fosters emotional resonance. When we recognize patterns that mirror the past, we feel a quiet sense of recognition, a bridge between centuries that situates our present anxieties within a continuum. Nostradamus captured this sensibility, intentionally highlighting forces that recur across time, cycles of power, upheaval, and transformation that shape societies in predictable, though not predetermined, ways. By attending to these echoes, we gain perspective. We are not isolated in our experience, and the uncertainties we face today are neither unique nor insurmountable. There is comfort in repetition, in understanding that history offers lessons and rhythms that can guide reflection. This historical resonance also invites subtle engagement with agency. Though patterns recur, they do not dictate inevitability. Recognizing echoes of the past allows us to act with awareness, to interpret signals with discernment, and to navigate complexity with intention. Nostradamus' work, while cryptic, encourages this reflective stance. By highlighting cycles, transformations, and disruptions, his quatrains provide an opportunity for mindful observation, allowing the attentive reader to discern not only patterns in history but also choices and consequences in the present. The prophecy becomes a tool not for fear, but for measured understanding. The parallels extend to the social dimension as well. Communities then, as now, responded to uncertainty with collaboration, adaptation, and resilience, even amidst fear and upheaval. Gossip, counsel, observation, and strategy shaped decisions in ways both subtle and profound. Similarly, in contemporary society, networks of information, dialogue, and collective action mediate responses to crises. Nostradamus' quatrains, in capturing the interplay of individual and collective dynamics, underscore a timeless truth: human behavior is shaped by circumstance, perception, and shared experience, and recognizing these dynamics fosters insight rather than anxiety. Ultimately, the world begins to resemble the past, not to frighten us, but to teach us that uncertainty is an enduring companion and that reflection, discernment, and attentiveness are timeless tools for navigating life. The quatrains, while cryptic, provide a lens through which we can observe continuity and change, encouraging a calm, deliberate engagement with the patterns that shape human experience. By bridging past and present, Nostradamus' words offer a subtle reminder: while history never repeats exactly, it resonates persistently, inviting us to see our time as part of a broader rhythm, one in which observation, reflection, and awareness carry profound significance. As we recognize these echoes, we are gently guided to the next step, considering how these patterns might continue, how cycles unfold, and how the subtle warnings embedded in the quatrains may still inform perception. In the following chapter, we will explore the delicate balance between attention and interpretation, examining how the world can reflect the past while remaining wholly our own, and how the prophecy persists as an invitation to mindfulness rather than a declaration of certainty. When we speak of what is happening now, it is tempting to imagine a sudden, dramatic event, a moment that defines an era in stark, undeniable terms. Nostradamus, however, reminds us that time is rarely so immediate. Now is not a single, isolated instant, but a continuum, a subtle unfolding across years, decades, even generations. Patterns repeat, tensions rise and recede, cycles emerge quietly until the weight of their recurrence becomes apparent. To perceive what is happening now is to notice these rhythms, to observe how the threads of history weave into the present, and to recognize that change is often gradual, cumulative, and interlaced with continuity. This perspective reframes urgency, replacing alarm with awareness and insight. Consider social and political shifts. Protests, debates, leadership transitions, and societal transformations are not singular anomalies but echoes of recurring dynamics. Fear, ambition, and conflict play out across centuries, adapting to context while maintaining recognizable patterns. When viewed as an ongoing process, the upheavals of today are less shocking and more a part of a historical continuum, a rhythm that has persisted through time, from Renaissance Europe to the modern global stage. In this context, Nostradamus' quatrains are not proclamations of instant doom but invitations to observe the flow of events with care, to understand that the present is shaped by the accumulation of influences rather than a sudden, catastrophic moment. Environmental changes, too, follow this principle. Floods, storms, droughts, and ecological disruption do not always manifest as singular disasters. Often, they appear incrementally, with subtle signals long before they fully unfold. Recognizing the patterns that precede visible impact allows for a measured understanding rather than panic. In this sense, the quatrain's imagery, rivers overflowing, skies disturbed, the natural world in flux, speaks to processes that are gradual, persistent, and interconnected. Observing these signals as part of a larger unfolding now offers insight into cycles rather than immediacy, inviting reflection and preparedness without fear. Technological and societal changes follow a similar arc. Innovations emerge, spread, and transform lives over time. Social structures adapt, economies shift, and the influence of new tools becomes visible gradually. The quatrains, in their cryptic descriptions of transformative forces, can be seen as metaphors for these enduring processes. By framing now as a continuum, we gain perspective. The changes that shape our world are part of larger patterns, moving in ways both subtle and persistent, and understanding their unfolding requires patience, observation, and discernment rather than immediate reaction. This reframing also alleviates the pressure of seeking instant clarity. In a culture increasingly obsessed with immediacy, the mind craves resolution, demanding answers that history seldom provides in real time. Nostradamus' work, with its ambiguity and temporal fluidity, encourages patience. The now he gestures toward is not about panic or immediate comprehension, it is about attentive observation, a practice of noticing, comparing, and reflecting across time. Each quatrain acts as a gentle prompt to see beyond the moment, to situate events within cycles, and to understand that what seems sudden is often the culmination of long, subtle processes. Meaning-making arises naturally in this context. By viewing the present as an unfolding pattern rather than a singular catastrophe, we reclaim agency over perception. Instead of feeling swept up in the tide of events, we can examine signals, trace connections, and cultivate awareness. The now is not a fixed point but an invitation to mindfulness, a chance to witness history as it flows, to recognize continuity, and to situate ourselves within a broader, unfolding narrative. In this way, Nostradamus' quatrains serve less as predictions and more as meditations on time, observation, and the human role in interpreting patterns. This perspective also fosters calm. Understanding that events rarely erupt fully formed, and that change unfolds gradually, relieves the pressure to react instantaneously. It allows us to approach the present with attentiveness rather than alarm, curiosity rather than fear. The quatrains' cryptic form mirrors this temporal fluidity, teaching that insight emerges not in the immediacy of dramatic moments, but in reflection upon cycles, repetitions, and connections. The unfolding, now, becomes a space for observation, contemplation, and meaning-making, rather than a source of panic. Ultimately, what is happening now is a slow crescendo, a convergence of historical echoes, human behavior, and natural forces. It is a reminder that patterns endure, that change is gradual, and that awareness, careful, attentive, reflective, is the greatest tool for navigating uncertainty. Nostradamus' work encourages this perspective, offering not fear, but context, not certainty, but reflection, and not urgency, but understanding. By situating the present within the flow of history, we learn to read the signs with patience, to perceive cycles without panic, and to find clarity in contemplation rather than immediacy. As we prepare to move toward the final sections of this journey, we begin to see how the cryptic whispers of centuries past can still resonate today. The patterns, the signs, and the careful observations of Nostradamus are not distant curiosities, they are threads we can trace in our own time, inviting a reflective engagement with the present. In the next chapter, we will explore how awareness of these ongoing patterns can shape perspective, influence understanding, and allow the now to be seen with clarity tempered by calm. Throughout history, humans have turned to prophets, seers, and wise observers whenever uncertainty loomed large. Nostradamus is only one among many who have captured this attention, yet his quatrains endure because they embody a deeper human impulse, the desire to understand, to anticipate, and to find order in a world that often appears chaotic. In times of upheaval, whether social, environmental, or political, our minds instinctively seek guidance. We look to the past to illuminate the present, to find patterns that reassure us that uncertainty is neither permanent nor incomprehensible. It is a search for existential comfort, a way of grounding ourselves amidst the unpredictable currents of life. This impulse is deeply rooted in our shared humanity. Across cultures and centuries, communities have recorded, interpreted, and transmitted knowledge in forms that blend observation, intuition, and imagination. Prophetic voices arise in part because human beings are pattern-seeking creatures, acutely aware of cause and effect, and constantly trying to anticipate outcomes. When faced with ambiguity, we instinctively project forward, imagining what might happen next. Nostradamus' work captures this impulse elegantly, encoding observations about human behavior, nature, and leadership into cryptic language that challenges the mind to engage, interpret, and reflect. The fascination he inspires is not solely about prediction, it is about participation in a timeless human endeavor, the quest to navigate uncertainty. In essence, seeking prophets is also a reflection of identity. In uncertain times, we question our values, our decisions, and our place in the world. We ask not only what will happen, but also what it means for us as individuals and as a collective. By looking to the past, to voices like Nostradamus, we locate ourselves within a broader continuum. We see that others before us grappled with fear, adaptation, and change, and we gain reassurance that the human experience, though unpredictable, is shared. This reflection fosters a sense of connection, reminding us that uncertainty is a universal companion rather than a personal failing, and that understanding can emerge through observation, interpretation, and reflection. There is also a psychological mechanism at work. Prophetic texts often present a structure, a narrative, a set of symbols, a pattern, that contrasts with the chaos of lived experience. Engaging with such material allows the mind to impose order, to explore possibilities safely, and to anticipate outcomes without bearing the full weight of uncertainty. This engagement is deeply satisfying. It exercises curiosity, promotes reflection, and offers the subtle reassurance that the world, though complex, contains recurring patterns that can be understood and navigated. In this sense, Nostradamus' quatrains function as both mirror and map, reflecting the challenges of human experience while providing a framework for contemplating them. Importantly, the search for guidance is not necessarily a surrender to authority. It is an exercise in discernment. Humans seek prophets not to abdicate responsibility, but to gain perspective, to expand understanding, and to see possibilities that might otherwise remain hidden. Nostradamus' cryptic approach reinforces this. By avoiding blunt proclamations, he engages readers as active participants, allowing them to consider patterns, probabilities, and consequences while maintaining autonomy of thought. In this way, the quatrains are as much an invitation to reflection as they are a repository of potential foresight. There is an element of existential comfort in this search. By situating ourselves within cycles that extend across centuries, we perceive continuity, resilience, and the capacity for adaptation. Uncertainty does not vanish, but it becomes more navigable. The challenges we face, societal upheaval, technological disruption, environmental stress, are interpreted through the lens of recurring patterns. Nostradamus, whether intentionally or inadvertently, provides a means to locate these patterns, offering reassurance that human experience, though variable, is not arbitrary. We see the same impulses, the same struggles, and the same opportunities recurring, and we understand that we are participants in an ongoing story rather than isolated actors facing chaos alone. This perspective also fosters empathy. Recognizing the anxieties of those who lived centuries ago, who observed the fragility of life, the unpredictability of leaders, and the volatility of nature, allows us to see that our own experiences are part of a larger, shared narrative. Prophets like Nostradamus remind us that uncertainty has always existed, and that human resilience, curiosity, and adaptability have always been crucial tools for navigating it. The search for guidance becomes a bridge across time, linking our present experiences with the struggles, questions, and reflections of those who came before. Ultimately, the human desire for prophets is a reflection of our ongoing quest for understanding, for perspective, and for meaning in the face of uncertainty. Nostradamus endures not because his predictions are exact, but because he offers a lens through which to explore patterns, cycles, and the persistent dynamics of human life. In engaging with his work, we participate in a centuries-old practice, observing, reflecting, and seeking insight from the past to navigate the present. It is a reminder that wisdom is less about certainty and more about attentive awareness, that guidance is not always a roadmap but a prompt to engage deeply, and that the quest for understanding is as old as humanity itself. As we move toward the conclusion of this exploration, we are reminded that the whispers of the past continue to resonate because the human condition remains fundamentally the same. Our search for insight, our attention to patterns, and our desire to make sense of uncertainty are constants that bridge centuries. In the final section, we will reflect on the lessons these whispers leave for us today, insights not meant to alarm, but to illuminate, guide, and calm, drawing the threads of history, observation, and human experience into a meaningful whole. One of the most remarkable aspects of Nostradamus' work is its insistence on participation. The quatrains are not declarations demanding passive acceptance, they are invitations to reflection, puzzles that require engagement, and mirrors through which each reader discovers something uniquely their own. The power of interpretation lies not in the prophecy itself, but in the act of contemplating it. In this way, the quatrains endure, not because they are immutable truths, but because they stimulate thought, curiosity, and personal insight, giving each observer a sense of cognitive ownership over meaning. Consider how the mind approaches ambiguous material. When confronted with symbols, metaphors, and fragments of historical or universal experience, humans instinctively seek patterns, attempt explanations, and draw connections. This process activates curiosity, engages critical thinking, and fosters a sense of personal relevance. In other words, the prophecy becomes meaningful not simply because of what is written, but because the reader invests attention, thought, and reflection into uncovering its significance. The quatrains serve as prompts, not answers, and it is this deliberate ambiguity that ensures their longevity. Each generation finds resonance in ways that reflect both the text and the reader's context. The quiet power of interpretation also lies in its capacity to provide calm insight. When one engages with the quatrains as invitations rather than warnings, the focus shifts from fear to understanding. Meaning is not imposed externally, it emerges internally through attentive observation and reflection. By considering patterns, historical echoes, and symbolic language, the reader cultivates perspective, patience, and discernment. This approach transforms the act of reading prophecy from a source of anxiety into a contemplative exercise, where insight grows gradually, subtly, and with a sense of personal agency. Cognitive ownership amplifies the psychological resonance. When we draw conclusions, connect symbols, or identify patterns ourselves, we internalize the learning. The quatrains become a lens through which we view not only history, but our own perceptions, biases, and interpretive choices. This is why Nostradamus continues to captivate. The reader is both participant and interpreter, engaged actively rather than passively. Each reflection, each interpretation, becomes a personal meditation on uncertainty, history, and human behavior. The prophecy lives in this dynamic interaction, thriving in the space between text and observer. There is also a subtle, enduring lesson in the very ambiguity of the quatrains. Because certainty is never delivered outright, the mind remains attentive, curious, and thoughtful. Patterns are suggested, rather than dictated, connections are implied, rather than imposed. This approach encourages humility in interpretation, acknowledging that understanding is provisional, context-dependent, and subject to re-evaluation. By engaging in this reflective process, readers cultivate a mindset attuned to nuance, complexity, and the persistent subtlety of human experience. Nostradamus' work teaches not prediction, but observation, and not certainty, but discernment. Moreover, the quatrains' open-endedness allows them to endure across centuries. Each era, with its unique challenges, discoveries, and anxieties, discovers new resonance in the text. The symbols remain stable, but their meaning adapts to context. A comet may signify fear in one century, technological upheaval in another, or environmental disruption in yet another. Because the quatrains invite interpretation rather than impose meaning, they remain relevant, flexible, and deeply engaging. In essence, the endurance of Nostradamus' work is not a function of prophetic accuracy, but of psychological design, a carefully constructed framework that ensures each reader finds relevance and insight in their own time. Reflection also fosters emotional connection. The act of interpreting, of seeking meaning, is inherently human. It mirrors the broader quest to make sense of life's uncertainties, to discern patterns in the apparent chaos of history and experience, and to locate oneself within time and context. By engaging with the quatrains in this way, readers experience both continuity and agency. They are connected to centuries of observation while also exercising their own judgment and insight. This dual engagement, between past and present, text and self, creates a profound sense of participation that extends beyond mere curiosity or entertainment. Finally, the quiet power of interpretation reminds us that prophecy is not a destination, but a journey. It does not provide final answers or certainty. Instead, it encourages active engagement, attentive observation, and contemplative reflection. In this journey, the reader discovers patterns, recognizes cycles, and cultivates understanding. The quatrains endure because they speak to this timeless human process, the search for insight, the exercise of judgment, and the reflective engagement with the world around us. In doing so, they prepare the mind and the heart for the final reflections, allowing the audience to conclude the journey with calm understanding, rather than urgency or fear. As we move to the closing section, we carry forward this sense of reflection and agency, recognizing that the whispers of the past, the signs we were never meant to miss, and the cryptic insights of Nostradamus ultimately converge to teach a single enduring lesson. Understanding emerges not in panic, but in careful attention, thoughtful interpretation, and mindful observation of the patterns that ripple across time. As the candlelight of history flickers softly in our minds, we are reminded that Nostradamus' quatrains were never meant to shout. They whisper, urging attention rather than alarm, reflection rather than reaction. The words he left behind are not instructions for panic, nor a call to despair. They are prompts for awareness, subtle markers for those willing to look closely, think carefully, and notice the rhythms that shape the world. In this quiet moment, we can see that the true prophecy may never have been about destruction at all. Instead, it speaks to understanding, attentiveness, and the calm recognition that uncertainty is a constant companion. Throughout centuries, humanity has faced cycles of upheaval, fear, and transformation. Leaders have risen and fallen, rivers have overflowed, storms have battered landscapes, and societies have trembled under pressures that seemed unbearable. Yet, across time, people have endured. They have adapted, reflected, and learned. Nostradamus captured this enduring tension between change and continuity with words that remain enigmatic yet persistent, a reminder that while circumstances shift, the human capacity for observation, understanding, and resilience persists as well. The prophecy whispers to us in the night not to predict the future, but to notice the patterns that have always guided survival and adaptation. In our own era, the quatrains take on subtle resonance. Social tensions, technological disruptions, environmental uncertainty, they can feel overwhelming, but seen through the lens of history, they are echoes rather than anomalies. Each challenge carries within it lessons embedded in centuries of human experience. The world may change, but the cycles remain familiar. There is reassurance in this continuity. We are not facing the unknown for the first time. Observation, reflection, and calm engagement are tools that have guided humanity through countless trials before, and they continue to serve us today. In this sense, the prophecy is less a prediction and more a gentle companion, guiding attention and fostering mindfulness. The imagery of the quatrains also encourages this reflective awareness. Comets, rivers, leaders, and upheavals appear across time, framed in symbolic language that invites interpretation. We are encouraged to look for meaning not in alarm, but in context, not in immediacy, but in cycles. Patterns emerge slowly, across generations, revealing connections between past and present, teaching patience and attentiveness. By noticing these markers, we cultivate perspective, allowing us to witness change without being overwhelmed, to understand without being consumed by fear. The whispers of the past thus become a source of calm, an invitation to observe rather than react, and a gentle reminder that awareness itself is a form of resilience. Sleep, in this context, becomes part of the lesson. Just as humans have faced uncertainty through the ages, they have also rested, recovered, and continued. The night, when the world is quiet and the mind slows, provides the perfect opportunity to reflect on patterns, cycles, and connections without pressure. Nostradamus' work is particularly suited to this quiet contemplation. The cryptic verses, the hidden signs, and the gentle insistence of the prophecy all mirror the rhythm of night, subtle, patient, and persistent. In this moment of calm, we can allow insight to emerge gently, without urgency, letting reflection settle naturally as the day fades and the mind prepares to rest. There is also a profound reassurance in recognizing that the prophecy does not demand certainty. Life is inherently unpredictable, and yet the human capacity for awareness, interpretation, and adaptation endures. By engaging with these whispers, we learn that insight is rarely immediate. Meaning is discovered slowly, through attentive observation, thoughtful reflection, and consideration of context. In this way, the quatrains teach a timeless lesson: understanding grows best in stillness, in contemplation, and in patience. The prophecy guides, but it does not command; it illuminates patterns without dictating outcomes. As we drift through this reflection, it becomes clear that the whispers of the past serve a gentle purpose. They prepare the mind for calm awareness, for thoughtful observation, and for acceptance of the cycles that shape life. They remind us that uncertainty, though inevitable, is not catastrophic. It is, instead, an opportunity for reflection, growth, and preparation. Humanity has always faced challenges, and humanity has always endured. The quatrains are a mirror to that enduring spirit, a quiet testament to resilience, adaptability, and insight. So, as the night deepens and the world slows, we can rest with this understanding. The prophecy of Nostradamus, with all its cryptic symbols and persistent ambiguity, is not a summons to fear but an invitation to awareness. The signs of past and present remind us that we are part of a continuum, participants in an ongoing story that extends far beyond any single event. By observing attentively, reflecting calmly, and embracing the gentle rhythm of change, we cultivate understanding, resilience, and quiet confidence in our capacity to navigate uncertainty. Tonight, as you settle into the quiet of your surroundings, let these reflections ease the mind. Let the whispers of centuries guide your thoughts without urgency, offering perspective, insight, and a gentle reminder that the cycles of history, change, and human experience continue to unfold, and that humanity endures through them all. Sleep well, rest deeply, and return to this calm reflection whenever the world feels uncertain. The whispers are always there, patiently waiting for attentive ears, ready to offer insight, perspective, and quiet reassurance in the night. As you lay back and let your thoughts settle, remember that the whispers of the past are not here to alarm, but to guide. Allow the quiet rhythms of history to soothe your mind, the patterns of human experience to bring perspective, and the soft insights of centuries to ease your thoughts. Drift into sleep knowing that uncertainty is a companion we have always faced, and that humanity endures. Let your mind rest, your body relax, and return to these reflections whenever you wish. Sleep well, and awaken with calm, clarity, and quiet wonder.